Well, we learned about a lot about our team. It's one of those things every year you do, right? The journey is what we do this for, and we've come a long way since this time last year. I think about this time last year, who we were and who we are now. It couldn't be further from the same team. Just very different mental makeup, very different physical makeup, very different path to get here. But the journey is what it's about, and these guys have done everything we've asked. I've just been so pleased with the mental makeup and the character of this team. They've embodied everything we've asked them to do. And it's funny now because you start making plans for next year of what you're going to do when we get back and when you got to start workouts. And we were doing the same thing this time last year and had no clue that we would be at this point.
Over here.
Kirby, a couple of things about recruiting. I know you're going to go after the best players in the country, but because you have such a good recruiting footprint around you, is there something strategic about your decision to reach into a Texas for an AD pitcher or reach out to Brock Bowers? Or is it more than just they're the best players?
Well, I mean, nobody really wanted A.D. Mitchell. I mean, A.D. Mitchell didn't have an offer. A.D. Mitchell was more of a workout tape that he kept sending us. And he's a unique situation. He's very different than Brock because, Brock was recruited nationally and really high thought of. But every situation is different. Our footprint is really good. When you look at the MVPs of our last game, Stetson Bennett and Javon Bullard, neither were very highly recruited in-state players who were good high school football players. You look at Ladd McConkey, he's an in-state kid that wasn't highly recruited. So our footprint is what our footprint is. We go after the players we think fit our culture, and that's more important than maybe where they're from.
And just one quick follow-up on that. We hear about Georgia's highly rated recruits in a developmental program like TCU. Aren't all programs developmental programs?
Yeah, and don't all programs also recruit? I mean, I think it's the truth lies somewhere in the middle. It's a narrative that gets put out there, but I talk to our players about it all the time. Our best players on our team are not our most highly rated players. We've got 4 or 5 guys that were not. I mean, they're really good football players, and TCU has a team full of really good football players. And I watch those guys play, and the way they play is so much more important than who wanted them out of high school. I mean, who cares? Our players respect football players, and they respect the football players on our team, whether they were a 2 or 3 star, and they respect the players on TCU's team, whether they were.
Hi, Coach Smart. You guys lost 15 players to the draft and 13 in the transfer portal last season. Which player has stepped up the most this year after losing a large pool of players?
There's no way I could name one. That's impossible to single out one guy. I think a lot of the guys that contributed last year improved. I mean, they got better, so they made themselves better. And then a lot of guys who didn't contribute at all contributed this year. I mean, that guy over there got better, but he was a major factor last year. Kenny McIntosh, to me, was a major factor last year, but he got better. There's a lot of guys that played last year that got better, but there's even more that didn't play that put themselves in a situation to be helpful for our program. Yeah, I mean, we're hopeful they're going to be able to play. I mean, that's really all I can say. We haven't done much since then, So since we've been at home, so I'm hopeful those guys are able to play and help us, and those guys want to play. I can promise you that.
How much more difficult has it got to coach defense with each season? I mean, we saw the high-scoring semifinals, and you being a defensive guy, does it frustrate you when you see scores like that in the semifinal setting?
Yeah, I don't know if frustrate is the right adjective, but it's something along those lines. You feel, okay, when is good defense going to be played in a semifinal or a final, for that matter? I mean, I don't know. Football has evolved to where offenses are definitely ahead of defenses. It just seems to expose itself more towards the end of the year. And I don't know if anybody can put a fingerprint on it. I'm not trying to put a fingerprint on it right now. I'm trying to stop the next play and trying to score on the next play on offense. But I don't, I think it is a thing. I just don't know what causes it or what allows it. But conditioning levels may have something to do with that, and offenses have been ahead of defenses, so you've seen a lot of high-scoring games.
Hey, Coach, with the entire football community being affected by the Damar Hamlin injury, what were your initial thoughts on it, and have you addressed the team about it?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I have children who play sports, and that injury happens actually in hockey and baseball probably more often than football, but it scares me. Thank goodness we have Ron Corson, who is almost a 30-year athletic trainer, and he was an athletic trainer for me, and he immediately reached out to me. We were studying, watching tape, getting ready for TCU, and he reached out and told me and said we need to address it with our team. So the very next morning, first thing we did is we brought in a mental health specialist, we brought in an athletic trainer, we brought in a team chaplain, and we prayed. We also addressed it from a mental health standpoint. And then Ron educated players on exactly what happened and how rare, but it can happen, and you have to have people in place to save lives. And what an incredible job they did on the scene to make sure that he has an opportunity to recover from it. So the education piece was important to us to ensure our players that safety measures are there.
The last question, when he came to, his first words were, "Did we win?" Now, is that something that you can use as a motivational factor going into Monday, seeing what this player, what his teammates mean to him?
Yeah, I don't think we'll use that as the motivating factor, but just his health alone is a great sign, and certainly happy for him and his family.
Thank you, Coach.
You're a perfect one to ask this age-old question. Is it harder to get there, harder to maintain?
It's hard both. There's nothing easy about winning football, successful football programs, and it's harder than it's ever been to maintain, and it's harder than it's ever been to get there. I mean, it's just the culture with all the things on the outside that we deal with now. It's harder than it's ever been, and it's why you see shorter coaching careers. You see coaches with the ability financially to step out because they don't love it. You see a lot of different things, but I can't say whether one's easier than the others. You don't do comparisons in that regard. They're both really hard in their own right. And sustaining, maintaining versus achieving and climbing the mountain, both difficult.
I talked to Frank County yesterday. Do you remember about the interview? You were well prepared on this. This was going to be the opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah, I don't remember much. It was, I knew Greg. I knew a lot of people at Georgia. I knew President Moorhead. I'd had a class with him, so it was a situation that I had prepared for a long time. But I don't feel like the decision was going to hinge on an interview. It wasn't going to be one of those. Do you answer it wrong? They wouldn't have been talking to me if they weren't interested. I was really consumed with my position I was in and making sure I did it right for the players where I was working, because that's so important to me that you don't put your career ahead of your team's.
Kirby, 20, 30 years from now, when you're playing your golf with your buddies, ask you about Stetson Bennett's legacy to the program. What would you tell them?
Well, I got a long story to tell. I can assure you that. I mean, you think about the things he and I have been through, decisions made. I mean, from the recruitment process to his official visit to what'll happen Monday night. I mean, where to begin? It'll be a long round of golf because there's a lot of history there for he and I, and just appreciative of the way he's handled everything and really what he stands for.
Coach, how are you doing this morning?
Great.
What's the vibe with the team thus far? You guys are here, ready to complete the mission. What will it take to come out victorious?
Well, it's the same thing it does in every football game. Who can control the line of scrimmage, who can be explosive, who doesn't turn the ball over. I mean, the game never changes, right? You just have more cameras here. You got more people viewing, bigger stage. a lot further away from home, but football's football, and our guys prepare for that really all year. So we got to go play a really, really good football team, and we'll have to play one of our best games of the year to be able to beat them.
Kind of random. Have y'all used the word repeat around the building at all? Have y'all said it?
Nah, we don't. I mean, it's never about that. I mean, we've never said repeat or defend. We hunt, and that's simple for us. We want to stay on the aggressive side of things. And again, I've just been a part of too many years where I came off a win that wasn't the narrative. You know, this team is not that team, and next year's team won't be this year's team. So they're completely independent of each other, just like every game is independent of the previous. We don't dwell in the rearview mirror. You know, we try to focus on what's ahead.
What do you recall about that? And can you speak to just the way his aura is going to hang over the sport?
Yeah, he was at Valdosta State, and my dad was a high school coach. So we were about an hour and a half where I grew up from the program he was at. And there were a lot of kids that went from my high school, my dad coached, that went and played at Valdosta State. So it was kind of the cradle of coaches at the time. A lot of coaches had come through there, and they did recruit me. He didn't personally recruit me, but his staff, the staff there, I was a defensive player. He was an offensive coach. So, you know, they had a tremendous staff. But my experiences with Coach Leach were just different. I mean, we played him the COVID year, and nobody warned me that before the game when you went and talked to him that he would talk, and he would talk, and he would talk. And I got worried because, you know, you got time limits to what you got to go do pregame, and I couldn't break away from the conversation. I mean, we had run out of time. I had to go be with our team, and I'm like, I got to go, and this guy's still going. And so then this year, I was a little more prepared, and I thought, okay, I'm going to have my time allotted with him and get away. And I found myself again, I couldn't get away. And he was talking about his South Florida place where he goes and how he's going to go down there after the season. And I kept looking at the clock going, I can't get away from this guy. He's unbelievable in his ability to carry a conversation and just talk about anything. But I really have enjoyed all the stories that come up. I've read all over social media where people talk about their experiences, interactions with him, and to read all the different ones is really cool.
Kirby, I'm just curious, as you look back over your tenure at Georgia, how did you get to the point where you said, this is what I want our offense to be, this is what I want it to look like, this is how explosive I want it to be?
I don't know that I completely define that. You know, that's an area that you do based on who you have on your team. So, like, when you have Nick Chubb and Sony, who I think are two first-round backs, you might look different than when you have Brock Bowers, Oscar Delp, Darnell Washington, tight ends, and then you got wideouts. You know, so like we've evolved to fit who we have on offense. Do you have to be explosive? Yes. But everybody's explosive different ways. You know, LSU was one of the most explosive teams I've ever played in 2019, and they were different than us. Alabama, the year they had the 4 or 5 first-round wideouts, they were explosive in a different way than LSU. So everybody has their way of being explosive, and that kind of evolves based on how your offensive coordinator wants it to. And our guy, Coach Muckin, does a tremendous job.
Just kind of a two-parter. You've been a coach for a really long time, been around some really great coaches. How much do you lean on that advice and that experience in clutch moments like this? And then what coach gave you the best advice and who was it?
I rely on all the coaches that I've worked with. I think we all plagiarize. I certainly give a lot of credit to my father, who was my first coach, and I grew up under his tutelage, and he meant a lot to me as a coach. And then Coach Bowden impacted me a lot, Coach Chris Hatcher, Coach Richt, and then I was probably with Coach Saban the longest. I think you learn different things from different people, and I learned a lot from each one. So the impact has kind of made me who I am. And now you can't stop learning. You never, when you're green, you grow, and you're ripe, you're right. So you never want to be ripe. To me, I'm learning from my coaches. And when you bring new coaches in, you're able to gain things from them, maybe how they do things, or you go to other schools and you study how they do things. I'm infatuated with some schools across the country that I think do an incredible job, and you always want to go visit them to see how they do it, just to make sure you keep getting better.
Sometimes a level of resistance when you really new coach comes in to a program. How much did you expect that in 2016? How much did you sense it? And then also, when did you sense it and sort of started to turn around?
When did you sense what?
And it started to turn around.
I didn't sense any resistance when I got there. I felt like I knew the culture I was coming into because I had coached on that staff. So it wasn't like, okay, we're gonna say everything you did was wrong and everything we do is right. I explained when I got there that there's a difference in the way we're going to do things than what they had previously done, but those were beliefs that I had, and that I needed everybody to buy into them because I believed it would work if we did it a certain type way. But I never made it about, and I told our coaches, it's never about the other staff versus this staff. I mean, we got multiple guys now on this staff that were on that staff. So it was never us against them. I think that can be really negative when you have a new coach come in and they talk about the old coach, because there's a level of loyalty there by the kids. I went through that as a player when I had different head coaches, so we were very sensitive to that. I didn't feel any resistance to buy into what we did. It was different what we did, and it was a tough first year because there was a little change in the way we did some things, plus we couldn't practice at our normal facility. But I did feel like there was a lot more buy-in the next year because the players were really elite leaders, and we had some really good leaders that second year, 2017, that kind of pushed us over the edge.
Kirby, there's always a lot of talk of the quarterback-coach relationship, quarterbacks and coaches, and it's always like now. How different do you think it's going to be next year without Stetson, who's had a lot of time with doing things like this over the last couple of years? And do you think that you two will have any kind of friendship or bond after this season?
Talking about Stetson? Oh, yeah. I'm going to have a friendship with every kid that leaves our program. I mean, I get texts all the time from the guys that left in the last 2-3 years reaching out. I keep a relationship with them. It's very important to me that when a young man leaves our program, they understand we are here for them. Not everybody's going to the NFL. And people think our kids go to the NFL forever. It's short-lived. And we've got guys that played for us, went to the NFL, and are already out. And I want to help them be successful in life. So that relationship with Stetson and whoever else, Kenny McIntosh for that matter, is going to be long-lived and important to me. As far as who takes over that seat next year, I'm not concerned with that right now. I know that it'll take its course, and we've got a lot of time to prepare for that. Yeah, he's a really special man to me. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to make it to the game. He's had some medical stuff, so it hurts me that he and my mom won't be here. But I know it's the right decision for them. He's been at almost every game in terms of home games that we've had in Athens and, playoff games. So it's tough that he's not able to make it. And, nothing worse than, watching your parents grow old. And it's like taxes. It's inevitable they're going to get old. And that's been tough. But he's taught me so much just about the way you handle things, the right way, the wrong way, control the controllables. The moment's never too big if you're prepared. And I always watched the way he prepared our teams and our staff in high school. And he was a very wise man and man of few words. And I try to follow his mantra as a coach. And I've certainly evolved from going to coach for other people. But a lot of my core beliefs come from the way he ran our programs in high school. Yeah, I don't think enough is said about the way they play. First of all, Joe Gillespie's unbelievable in what he does. And people try to paint this picture that it's the Big 12 defense. They are not exactly like other Big 12 defenses. They are very unique. We studied them at Tulsa. He did an incredible job at Tulsa. When we played Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl, he was the defense coordinator at Tulsa. They had done the best job against Cincinnati and had really stoned them in this defense. They have incredible toughness, keys. I can't say enough about what they do because what they do is so different, you can't simulate it. I associate it to being a triple option offense. Okay, when you go play them, you can't do what they do as good as they do it. We're trying to do what they do with our defense. Our scout defense is completely different, and it's a concern because they're unique in what they do, and they gave Michigan some problems in what they did. So a lot of credit to what they do. We'll have to prepare well for it. We'll have to adjust in game to it, but it's the way his kids play. They play extreme physicality. And if you don't bring the contact, they will bring the contact to you.
You talked about your dad. I want to ask you, in a profession that keeps you away from your kids so much, what's it like to have Andrew around and want to be around and be such a part of this team?
It's awesome. I worry more about my other two that they don't care to be around it. They're a little older. They didn't immerse themselves in it. They don't love football. They love what football brings with the trips and the chances to go places, but they don't love football. He loves football and he likes contact and he enjoys the relationship with the players. He's got a very different personality than them, so it's great because that gives me somebody with me, but I have to work really hard to spend time with my other ones because I spend so much time with football that he's around it. I end up getting more time with him.
Kirby, with the TCU working through this year, playoff expanded the future, how much more difficult is it going to be for the traditional college programs to navigate these?
You're saying when it goes to 12, how hard it'll be hard for the traditionals to win, or
Just to make it
I think it's going to be hard for anybody to. Like, I don't know that I would pigeonhole it to the Power 5 or maybe I don't know if you're talking about the SEC. You're going to have more teams involved, which creates more opportunities for, I don't know if it's TCU or whoever. I think what people aren't considering is where people are going to play and home field advantages and southern teams going north in December, northern teams going south in December. All that's going to have a factor on it, but I can't sit here and say that Power 5s are going to have a harder time because I actually think there's going to be more opportunities for more Power 5s. You're going to have some teams going head-to-head in early rounds that are going to make some great matchups. I think this year's semifinals games, as I understand it, were the closest it's ever been. And that's unique because it hasn't been that way in the past. Maybe that brings more evidence that we need the playoffs and that teams will be a little more parity like you see in the NFL. I worry more about the players. I think they need to be comfortable in it, and I don't think you can get players comfortable in these environments because they don't get the repetitions that maybe a coach gets. So I've had the opportunity to call it from Texas, Pasadena, my first one, playing Texas in the Rose Bowl, all the way through the games we've had. I've had a lot of them that allow me to be at peace with the decisions, and you make the best decisions, and you do what you practiced, and you live with the outcome. You try to do it better than the other team. But the kids, the players, you can say, well, all these guys played last year. No, they didn't. Not all of them. And it's unique for them. So you try to help them be at their best, and that's my job. I don't worry about myself. I don't worry about our coaching staff because so many of them have been in games like this. I don't know that I can say buck the trend because we've taken them this year, and we would have taken some probably last year if the right ones were willing to come. We didn't turn our nose up on the portal and not use it. We searched for a certain type kid, and that will continue to be the case because I think it's a culture element for us. It's like who fits what we do, and if they don't fit what we do, then I don't think we should bring them in. And I'm a lot more worried about retention than I am going to get them, if you know what I'm saying. Like I want to spend time investing in the people in our program to keep them in our program than I am replacing them with someone else.
How important has the staff building process been in this last year, over the last 2 years, and the relationships that you have with the
Staff's always important. Like the culture, we're together so much. We're together more with each other than we are sometimes with our own families. But we had 4 coaches leave, so I don't know if it's staff building because we had 4 guys leave and we had 4 new guys come in. I think the onboarding process and the integration of this staff has been incredible. I feel as though this is the strongest staff I've ever had, and this is probably the most incredible job as a staff we've done with a team. So I'm very pleased with what this staff has done.
Why do you think this is, or some of the reasons why you think that this is one of the strongest staffs?
Well, only because it's the last staff I've had, and I would say that every staff I've had is strong, and a lot of them have been consistent, and they respect the University of Georgia, and they work really hard for Georgia. So it's the next year's staff will probably be better than this year's. Yeah, somebody asked that earlier. I can't compare those two things. I wish I could. It's just hard. Football is hard. Life is hard. There is nothing easy about what we do in terms of management of portal, in terms of management of players, in terms of playing the game and the workouts. It's hard. It's hard to maintain. It's hard to grow and move. It's hard. And if you like hard, then you'll fit in our place. But there's nothing easy about what we do, and I can't compare the two.
Talking about the new staff, the new guys, Shadera, why did you want him on your staff, and who has he brought now you've had him for years?
Well, Sonny actually gave him rave reviews, and Coach Dykes was just bragging about he was a rising star. And we had done a lot of research across the country, and we were familiar with a lot of coaches who could have come into our system and probably known our system better, but we wanted to get the best coach, not the most familiar. And once we interviewed him, we saw what people told us, and I give Coach Schumann and Coach Muschamp a lot of credit because I let them manage the interview process. I'm in the interview, and I decide who we're bringing in, but I want them to do the research. They're going to work with them. They're attached to assistant coaches better than I am. I think sometimes as a head coach, you don't know the pool like you used to when I was a young assistant. And I think Shu and Will, even though Will's not young, did a great job of digging for Chidera and finding value, and we made a really good hire there.
About where college football is, all the outside factors, all the different changes that have happened. What keeps you going, and what is it about a team like this that you get to coach that keeps you going?
What keeps me going is the love for the game and the relationships. I hate that I feel like it's diminished. 10 years ago, my relationship with players was way higher than it is now because my time demands are different. When you're a position coach, assistant coach, or a defense coordinator, you're one-to-one a lot. Now, 10 years later, that time is taken away, and that makes it. I could see how coaches gravitate towards, this isn't what I got into coaching for. I mean, you're much more of a CEO, organizational. I spend 80% of my time on things that are non-relational, and I think I got into it to have relationships, to have fun, to be on the grass, and now I find it business management, and it's tougher. And that's probably driven some coaches away from it. But it's that 20% that you get to spend relationships with that keeps you doing it. Yeah, I mean, it's the model we get, right? It's strange to me that you get the 28, and 28's a long time, okay? Then you get is it 9 or 10? I don't know technically how you define it, but 9 or 10 is more realistic, and you almost wish it was that for both, for the kids' sake, because I think that has a little mental and emotional wear and tear on players in terms of how long it goes on. And there's very few sports that you would wait 28 days to play. This turnaround is much more natural, but it is the model. And it sounds like it's going to change because it's not going to be that long before we're playing week to week. I hope that moment hasn't happened yet. I hope that defining moment is still ahead for him. But that's a hard question to answer because there's so many moments. I think people would point to the fumble against Alabama, but that's in the past. I would point probably to the moment his mom and he came in my office and said he was leaving to go to junior college, and that he wanted to play, and that he felt he was good enough to play, and he wanted to go play. And he knew there was no guarantee that he was going to play at our place the next season, but he knew he could play if he went to Mississippi. And they sat in there with complete confidence, and I didn't doubt them. I just didn't know if it was at Georgia. And that conviction they had when they sat in my office should have said, there's something special about this guy, I can't hear anything you're saying.
I was talking to Javon just now. He said your team doctor sort of met with everybody and talked about what happened tomorrow. What was that like, and what prompted you to have that situation?
Yeah, when that happened to DeMar, I immediately got on the phone. I started receiving texts, and I called our athletic trainer. He reached out to me, our mental health specialist, and also our team chaplain, because so many of our kids are believers in Jesus Christ, so they were concerned. And you start asking questions. If you play, could this happen to me? So we did an education the very next morning, first thing in. We went through with 2 separate groups, and we educated them on what exactly happened. The injury actually happens more often in baseball and hockey than football. It's a rare football injury. And we had a mental health specialist if anybody wanted to meet with, and we said a prayer with both groups. And then Ron kind of explained to him what happened and how fast they reacted to save his life. And that's also probably the most misdiagnosed injury there are in sports, where people don't realize what's happened. And they did a great job there with the Buffalo organization to save his life. So we just wanted our kids to feel comfortable with us. And I'm glad I had people on my staff that came to me and said, we need to address this, because it brought peace to a lot of the players.
Obviously, everybody in college football now wants explosive offense. And it seems like you have to have the capability of doing that to win some games. I'm just curious, as you have built out your now explosive offense, you want to do it in a way that doesn't kind of hinder what you want to do with the defense. Like, I guess that's the idea of complementary. And is that important too, that you're explosive in a way that doesn't hurt your defense?
Yeah, I know where you're going with that. I agree with that. I don't know. Yeah, it's important to me that we're good on defense and we're explosive on offense. Do those two lend themselves? They can. They do for us. I mean, we have what I think is a very explosive offense. We keep up with those numbers, and we've been very explosive on offense. At one point, we were leading the SEC in differential. So it's not about how explosive you are. It's about how more explosive you are than the team you're playing. And our differential throughout the year has been the greatest. So we don't give up as many, and we get a good bit. So if you can be one in both categories, you're elite. But if you can be high in one and high in defense, then you're going to have a better chance of winning your games. You can't give up a ton of them and get a ton of them and be good. But I don't think the two have to coexist. I think you can merge that. And the way you go about it, I think there's some teams that are explosive that maybe sacrifice defensively. We'll never do that because we have to be able to play defense in our league. You will never get to important games if you don't play good defense. Yeah, I think there's times to look at that, and I'm very process-oriented where it's like, okay, we're going to play the season. We're going to go back and review it just like we do. How did we play third down? How did we do on offense and short yards and goal line? You do the same thing in officiating. And fortunately, I'm on a committee that gets to sit in Indianapolis for 2 days in a room full of people and officials, and we analyze that. There's a time and place for that. So how do I stand on it right now? I'd rather evaluate it when I'm in a vacuum and able to look at it without saying right now, because I only know my league. And I think the SEC does an incredible job of officiating, and I got a lot of respect for the job they do. It's easy to sit back on Twitter and Instagram and talk about officials until you've gone out there and done it, and you got to make split-second decisions. And I think they do a phenomenal job of self-critiquing so they get it right. But it's not easy. What are we on time-wise? I don't see any countdown stuff. So what are we at? 10, 15, 20? Good. Like all y'all? Yeah, I think you got to have a mature team. You know, I've told our team repeatedly, best conditioned, best practice, and who handles the travel and the game and all the other stuff, the auxiliary stuff. That's who usually has this outcome. It's unfortunate because you'd like for these two teams to go play like they play all year. This game is nothing like you play all year. We don't do this. So you play on a Monday. Nobody plays on a Monday. You play in L.A. Nobody plays really in L.A. but the teams that are from L.A., okay? And you take people out of their normal routine, and then who manages that best? I think that's really critical in who manages it. But we do it from a process standpoint of this is Thursday, this is Friday, and this is Saturday. Today, we're technically on Thursday. I know it's not Thursday, but it's Thursday of a game week, so we're trying to replicate that as best as possible. Left.
Talk about the process. To be able to do this 2 years in a row, does it help going through this multiple times? How does it almost players know how to do it?
It does not hurt. Like I told somebody earlier, we're not here because we were here last year. Okay, it helps that we were here last year. I told our players we got here last night, and I'm like, this is like a zoo. It's like Vegas. It's like it's just craziness. And you think about last year, they never saw the outside of a building because they were inside. I mean, it was just different. The weather was different. It was a different venue. So there's no similarities to where the two games were played and really the way everything was set up. So it's very unique. But we're not here because we were here last year. But I did tell our staff, I think the practices and the preparation last year leading up to that game, the amount of time that we worked our 2s and 3s and we dedicated ourselves to getting those guys better, that probably put us over the edge in 1 or 2 games this year. That the work those guys got, maybe that won us a game. And that one game got us to where we are. So are we doing the same thing this year? Are we like growing our players? Because there's a bunch of guys on our roster that I'm like, man, we got a bunch of mid-years that are practicing with us. Well, last year that was Michael. That was Jalen Walker. It's these guys that are contributing. So I love the extra practice we're getting and work we're getting for the development of the team.
Coach Rick was talking the other day about you came in, a lot of things, expand staff, obviously, facilitating you
puts you in a position to do a lot of things. I know obviously you can't win the national championship, but do you think with sort of the things that you have in place now in the program that you could be in this position every year to contend for the national championship? I know you want to work this carefully, but just.
I mean, I feel like he was too. I mean, I'm saying he was in the. I mean, if there ever been a 4-game playoff or the playoff system, it's hard to argue that Georgia wouldn't have won a national championship. I studied that from afar, as you know. I mean, I was in the state recruiting, and there's a lot of years that they would have definitely been in the 4. If there was a 12, I assume they probably would have been in almost every year. And I think it's easy to say that we have had, our staff since arriving has had success because of some of the things that our administration learned from that. And, you know, the indoor is not a fair because that had nothing to do with the indoor. I got there, the indoor was already, they designed it. It was being built. The ground was being broke my first days at work. But that was one of the key cogs. Everything else has come since then, and they had success. Just never quite got lucky enough. There's some unlucky breaks in there, I think, that you can look at, and he knows that. I mean, Coach Richt and I are close, and he knows how close they really were. But can we do it every year? Personally, I think we really have. Like, outside the first season I was there, there's not a year that we weren't – the game didn't matter we were about to play until the SEC championship besides one. And I think that's how you contend, right? You get to the SEC championship, that puts you in contention every year, and that's what you have to do. You have to win the East, and we've done that most years besides one. But we wouldn't have done that as quickly if it wasn't for Coach Richt, his staff, the things he built. There was a good program in place when we got there. Teams what? Well, the Peach Bowl doesn't necessarily do that alone. The whole season does, right? So, like, our team has been built to this point where we are, and we're evolving, and you see a different dynamic each and every week. I've been very fortunate to see this resiliency that we talk about in our DNA. I've seen it in TCU too. You know, I got to watch them play several times. I talked to Coach Dykes at the Heisman Trophy about what an unbelievable job he did to end the Baylor game, and his management of that situation was just phenomenal. And as coaches, that's like a player seeing another player make a play. So for me, that was like a coach managing a situation the right way. So I think both teams have grown and gotten a lot better throughout the season, which comes to a culmination now.
For you for SI social media, what is your go-to Waffle House order?
Oh, bacon, egg, and cheese, hash browns, smothered, covered.
No pecan waffle?
Nah, my kids get the pecan waffle, but I'm more of a bacon, egg, and cheese man. Thank you.
Hey, Kirby. You know, we got to talk to all the South Georgia players and the team. And, man, in charge of Bainbridge, so how's it to represent Bainbridge on the stage?
It's awesome, man. WALB. I grew up watching Ducky Wall down there. Y'all probably don't even know who that is. Yeah, that's my parents and I spent every Friday night tuning in to watch the other highlights. I can remember as a 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old kid watching the highlights on Channel 10 News as a kid, and that was my game day. You know, that was my college game day when I watched high school games on that channel. And I remember Coach Bobo came back to our staff, and we had an old VCR tape. People don't even know what VCR tape is, of all the high school shows recorded. And he would always talk about his highlights, and I would talk about my highlights, and he'd talk about Thomasville, and I'd talk about Bainbridge, and how many times we went to Hugh Mills Stadium to play. And I was a little gym rat running around Hugh Mills Stadium my entire life because my dad's teams had to go play there 4 times a year. So 4 or 5 times a year, I'm sitting in that stadium. I thought that was home to me. That was my Mercedes-Benz. And we always had a good time going to play in Albany, and a lot of great memories from South Georgia, and certainly the people from Bainbridge is where I call home. And although my parents don't live there, that's what I think of as home.
Last question, Kirby. I think it's pretty cool that your entire roster, nobody's from the Is that kind of the mindset you want to recruit in some of these players?
What's that again?
Like, so I think it's amazing how your roster has nobody from New York, and you guys still, making these championship runs. Is that kind of the mindset you want to recruit players? Like, you want homegrown talent all the time?
Well, we want to manage our players and want them to enjoy being there, and we want them to know we're investing in them. But we do have, it's not fair to say we don't have anybody from the portal. We just didn't take anybody from the portal this season. We do have some kids like Tyke Smith and older players that came from the portal, but there'll always be a factor for us to use the portal because sometimes kids are looking for a chance to be at a place like Georgia. And the kids we take, we tell them, you come here, it's different. We're going to practice different. We're going to hit different. We're going to work different. And if you don't want different, don't come. So it's very important they understand the culture they're entering. But I'm really proud of our retention rate, meaning the kids we keep. And we're going to lose some kids. We lost kids last year, but it's making sure that we get the right ones and we keep the right ones is the most important thing. All right. Good. Jeff, I got a question for you. What's the no? What's the narrative? What's the whole Rick thing? I saw that article you did. Like, what's
I just
the?
did a Q&A with him on.
I saw that. It's good.
Thanks. Just on his view of things.
Right.
No, he was great.
How's he doing?
He's doing. His quote to me was, he talks to me. He talks slow. He walks.
Right.
He's lucid. Everything's good. He's changed medication.
Oh, I got you. I wonder if he's coming out to this. Probably not coming out here. Yeah, he was at the one last year.
Huh?
He went to Indy last year
Yeah,
because they were all up there with Vince. Right.
Just some good days. It works for our ACC now.
Oh, that's right.
There's some good days and bad days, but just a wonderful day.
Oh, none ever better. Nobody ever better.
The medications he's going on now has actually been around forever, but he was trying to avoid it because
It's long term.
and so, but he's now started on that.
It'll actually help some.
He's taking low levels.
I know he's proud granddaddy.
Oh yeah,
That's-
don't talk forever about his kids. I totally get it. I got a great.
Catherine's awesome too. They were great. They sent us letters when we were in Alabama. They'd send about once a year. I get a letter in the mail like, "Hey, we're praying for y'all," and I'm just like, not many like him. He's okay. He's having to wear a defibrillator vest, so it sucks. He can't play golf, all the things he wants to do, so he feels limited. But they're saying it's going to be short term because they had a blocked artery. He had to get a stent put in, and if the stent going in helps, he'll get back to normal life. But we're still waiting to see if that happens. Just not here, not doing well. Most of his friends know, but he's just not able to get out and do what he's normally doing. That's the hardest part. Sitting in the house with mom is about to drive him crazy. That's right. Especially one that just wants to play golf.
Is it harder on him or is it harder on your mom?
Oh, it's definitely harder on her. No question. That's like, I wanted her to come out here, and he was like, no. She was like, no, I'm not leaving him. I said, it'll do y'all some good to be apart, but.
Because he was in India yesterday.
He was what?
He was in India.
Oh, yeah, he's been at everything. That's what kills him, not being on the sideline. He don't like sitting up there listening to all the fans.
Was he at the game last week?
No, he couldn't go. He was actually had an appointment at Emory and then had to go back home for the game, so he couldn't go to the game. They don't want him walking and doing all that stress, walking around, so he's got to wait till they prove that his heart's getting stronger.
So has he been in any games this year?
And all of them, it didn't hit until the gap between SEC and the other one. That's when all that hit. So he's in every game up until SEC. What's up?
Ringo made a play last year that's going to be remembered 40, 50 years from
Sure.
now. It's like Lindsey Scott, you say that, But he was talking about within moments of it and days of it, like vowing that he wants to do things to make him known for more than just a play.
Right.
What do you think what are your feelings about that, and what does it say about him and so on?
Well, it says he's got a good mental makeup. You don't want to be defined by one play, whether that's positive or negative. Nobody wants to be defined by that, and we as coaches will never do that. I think as fans, that's going to be hard to overcome because that moment was so long awaited, and so many people associate that game with that play. But just as big as that play is Jalen Carter blocking a field goal. I mean, there's huge plays within that game. Stetson Bennett's bouncing back. But it says a lot about Keeley that he doesn't want that to define him. He wants to continue to work, and I'll give Keeley this. He's worked really hard this year to improve. It's so hard for people to see improvement because all they see is that play. They don't see the grassroots work ethic he's had to get better this season.
I know composure is one of y'all's DNA traits, but this whole idea of composure is one of y'all's DNA traits, but the idea of closing the bar and point that out when you need it. So where did that come from? Was that new for this year, or we just heard about it more this year? Where did that sort of originate?
It's a little new. The application of that statement is kind of new. I mean, we've always had composure as one of our 4 DNA traits. I think it's critical to be successful in all sports to have composure. But we talked about muscles, and kids understand muscles because they train them and they lift. So that liking it to a muscle, and I'm going to redeem my card, I think that started more with me thinking about my kids and Chick-fil-A and the way you take your chicken sandwich card in there and you get a chicken sandwich. I mean, so I want to physically remove the card and use it when I need it. And we've had several kids do that within a game. It just shows you that what you're saying is having an effect. They listen, it's nothing more than that. It's not a real card. It's an intangible thing.
How much more different do you feel like this team is from a composure standpoint maybe than last year, just in the fact that y'all have had a lot more closer games, times of struggles, things like that?
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, they're just a different group. It's nothing to do with composure. The composure similarities are there, but it's just a very different team altogether.
Coach, when you have time to really get intricate with the film and watch the team, has something surprised you about TCU that you didn't know about before?
Yeah, I've watched some games just casually on TCU and seen some things. I had not really watched their defense until we drew them as an opponent, and I probably watched their defense a lot, and just the way they key and diagnose and strike is really elite. You can tell they're really well coached. You can tell they're very tough. You can tell they're very talented, and their coaching staff deserves a lot of credit for the way with which they play.
Coach, when you're watching the team, the secondary is really the primary area of football thrown so much. So what have you seen from their secondary?
Playmakers. I mean, they had 2 pick sixes last week. I mean, they harass. They have a lot of depth in their defense. They get hands on balls. They cover down and strike people. They have people around the ball a lot, ball hawks.
Thank you, Coach.
Help me out. Just I want to be able to shoot. Get the camera here. Thank you.
Coach Smart, since we are just right outside Hollywood, I'm curious if your team was casted in a movie, which players would play the role of a villain and the role of a hero?
No way I would know that. The hero's always the quarterback, right? The villain's always the bad guy. So we don't have any bad guys. So I don't know. Maybe we would be the coaches as the villains and the players as the heroes, because we're usually the bad guys when it comes to that.
And Coach, I of course asked some of your players who they thought in Hollywood could play the role of you if the team had a movie made. One of them said Mark Wahlberg. What do you think about that?
That's pretty cool. I like Mark Wahlberg. I've always enjoyed his shows and films. I like that analogy. He's probably a lot more talented and a lot younger and a lot better looking than I am. So I usually go with Robert Redford for the old wrinkles in the face like Redford.
My last question: if there was a movie made about your team, what would the title be?
Fans, don't forget to join
Grit.
us all weekend for Playoff Fan Central.
Playoff Fan Central is located here at the Los Angeles Convention Center, offers a wide array of family-friendly entertainment and interactive experiences that'll put you right in the middle of the action as we celebrate the pinnacle of the college football season. Admission is free.
The ability to confront and demand and make sure that people understand the importance of everything you do matters. I mean, I think he has elite organizational traits and leadership traits, and taking some of that from him is probably the biggest thing.
Some of the players said that the goal is always talked about is really winning national championships. How often is that talked about in the fall off season? How much of a focus is that?
Never. We don't talk about it. No, he was not able to go to the Peach Bowl. He was at the LSU game, the SEC championship, but not the Peach Bowl.
When did you get a chance to discuss the Peach Bowl game with him?
I didn't get. I wanted to call him that night, but he was already in bed by the time it got to that point. So the next afternoon on the way home, we got to call him and talk.
Coach, is it hard to stay in the moment when you've been able to get this program to the level it's been and hopefully be able to sustain this going forward?
No, it's never hard to stay in the moment. I mean, I'm pretty grounded when it comes to that stuff, and you just focus on what's the next thing I can control, like what's the next event we have. I don't. Staying grounded has never been a real problem for me, because humility is 1 week away, and that's what I always say is humility is a week away, so you got to focus on the task at hand.
When success can breed complacency, but these guys seem like it's always there's another ring to reach for. How do you reach them? How do you get them to see that belief?
Well, you do it through how you act and how your coaching staff works. You know, like we're never going to arrive as a program. I think complacency sets in. It can be a disease. And I talk about entitlement. You know, like when you start feeling entitled, that's how the mighty fall. And we take a lot of business analogies, how companies have fallen in this world we live in society we live in. How do empires fall? How do companies fall? How do businesses fall? You see the ebb and flow and what destroys them, and we try to learn from their mistakes. And a lot of that is denial, hubris. I mean, you have to stay humble, or anything will get you. And our kids understand that.
Hey, Coach, not having Uga on the sidelines for Monday, are we concerned about that? That's a scary thought.
It's a scary thought. I just realized that. I didn't know that until I read it, I guess, last night or yesterday. So be different. I can't lie. I don't see Uga a lot. I'm usually tied up in some other things, but I know that'll be a big deal to a lot of fans. But it's a good decision by the Siler family.
And just one follow-up question. Apparently the rapper Drake loves you guys on Monday, but there's a Drake curse. Are you worried about that?
I don't know what that is, so I'm good.
That's a good thing.
All right, thanks, Coach.
Thank you and good
Is
luck.
that all?
Thank you very
Thank
much.
y'all. Sure. Yeah.